everybody. Welcome to our very first main stage presentation at HIMSS 25. We're thrilled that you all are here. This is sponsored by CGI, so we thank you for attending. And our first session today is going to be on transforming healthcare communication and beyond. We have the CEO of Documo, Dennis Whelan, who's going to be presenting. Dennis?
Awesome. Welcome everybody to Las Vegas if you traveled in here. Appreciate all of the exhibitors sponsoring and being able to make this happen, and all the attendees that are here to learn. My name is Dennis Whelan. I'm the CEO of Documo. We're going to be talking about transforming healthcare communication, specifically beyond some of the legacy forms today. Quick background on me. I mentioned I'm the CEO of Documo. I have 3 small children, 10, 8, and 6. I'm from Marblehead, Massachusetts, which is a couple minutes outside of Boston. And sorry to say, I'm an Eagles fan. Super happy we won the Super Bowl, which is great. I heard somebody clap for the Eagles. And I'm a hopeless woodworker. If you see me limping around, I dropped a giant 2x4 on my foot prior to coming here. That's because I'm not very good at woodworking. So, why does healthcare communication need to be transformed? Is kind of the original question. There's probably a lot of people that are like, duh. There's a lot of reasons. Some of those most important reasons, when you look at the top 25 healthcare systems, there's almost 21 billion documents that are processed on an annualized basis, which is a lot of documents. And beyond that, there's almost $300 billion of administrative complexity cost that's caused by these documents. And then on top of that, the average HIPAA fine is $1.5 million. So the stakes are high. There's a lot of administrative complexity. There's a lot of documents that are flowing around, and the risk is big. And so, the net of all of that is administrative complexity is running rampant in the healthcare space. And this is further compounded by the complexity of communications that are happening in the space today that we all know about. This is a bit of a sad stat, but 75% of healthcare communication is done through fax, which is wild to think about in 2025. And not just that, 9 billion faxes overall from a count perspective are sent in healthcare annually. There's about 1 billion direct secure messages that are sent annually as estimated through the direct secure statistics. And QHIN provides yet another communication channel that we need to think about and adopt to. And so really the takeaway from this is that there are many forms of communications that exist that are pervasive in healthcare that make things really difficult for us to operate and operate inside of our environments. And whether you're a health tech organization, a provider, a payer, a patient, that complexity is seen in a variety of ways across the board. So much of that complexity that exists is interoperability driven. And it's not interoperability in the sense of EHR to EHR interoperability. It's interoperability in the sense of document interoperability. Documents are the sore toe, in my case, of the healthcare space. And actually, a friend of mine yesterday did one of the presentations. If anybody had a chance to go attend it, Brendan Keeler, and he talked about the messy middle of network development. And this is all about the stage that we're in right now with the variety of communication channels that exist. And the takeaway from his presentation was that really the arc of network evolution has a really, really messy middle, and we're in that messy middle right now. But ultimately, it leads to commoditization and ubiquity of communication tools, which is a really good place for us to go, okay, as an industry. When we take a step back and look at the types of communication channels that exist today, really they're categorized into three spaces, right? And I mentioned EHR to EHR integration, which is the structured electronic integration. These are API-driven, standards-based communications, again, usually system to system. This is not necessarily, not to say that we're perfect here, the problem that exists today as it relates to administrative complexity around communication. They sit in buckets 1 and 2, which is the physical channels and the electronic unstructured channels that, again, are pervasive in the healthcare space. And this is everything from analog fax, phone, all the way through to secure and direct secure messaging and cloud fax. And so to solve this problem, the way that we've historically thought about it is we throw people at this, right? Not in terms of electronic and structured documents and or information exchange, but we throw people at point 1 and point 2, okay? Now, if we juxtapose all of this against some of the things that we do know and don't know as it relates to policy, forthcoming policy, there's a lot of things that we don't know from a policy perspective. When we look historically at policy, and this is not a political presentation, I'm not going to discuss kind of the details of who does what, but there's been ebbs and flows of different policies that have been rolled out through healthcare, all the way from the HITECH Act and the Cures Act, which really started to promote both the adoption of EHRs, but then beyond that, EHR to EHR interoperability. More recently, TEFCA and the ONC have done a really good job in throwing QHINs into the mix as another pull and push communication network. And the future is a little bit unknown for what's going to happen, for where we're going to end up in a final destination perspective. There is speculation on TEFCA and potential defunding. What's clear, and I'll go back to we don't know what the policy is going to be, but what is very clear for what we do know is that administrative complexity is impacting quality of care. And quality of care is something that matters to all of us. The really, really interesting thing is that all of this is happening while AI is becoming a very important tool that people are trying to figure out how to use to solve some of these problems. In particular, when we looked at the categorization of different communication channels, both the analog and physical channels that we talked about in point 1 and point 2, there was research that was done by the NIH that forecasted there was going to be 18 million fewer health tech jobs by 2030. What my view on that is that it's not going to be in the actual healthcare. It's going to be on the administrative and communication side of the healthcare space. And we could see this as analogs in other industries as well. Other industries have seen the impact of AI as the pointy tip of the spear in communication and rote processes that exist in healthcare, which our industry is rife with rote processes for us to be able to automate or have assisted automation impact. So, how's it going to get rolled out? What does the maturity curve look like? For those that are fans of Geoffrey Moore, is one of my favorite authors, there's a concept called the maturity curve in his book, Crossing the Chasm. And in Crossing the Chasm, it goes through really the adoption curve of different technologies. And this is a dynamic adoption curve that is used in almost any type of technology adoption. And usually laggards are the ones that are using kind of the most legacy tools, then late majority, the latest adopters. Early majority, we've crossed the chasm, and now there's some adoption. And where we are with AI is really in kind of the innovators and early adopters space. So when we think about communication, and in particular administrative complexity and the use of AI, what is our maturity curve? And where do we stand against those things? Well, the laggards are very obvious, right? This is legacy fax, on-premise solutions, on-premise fax servers, POTS lines. These are the things that are legacy today. and have been legacy for quite some time. This is kind of the laggard presence that exists in healthcare from a communication standard. As we look toward the early majority, there's been a bunch of CloudFax adoption, which has digitized documents, albeit those documents are still unstructured data. And that is not always the easiest thing to process and requires those people to still be in front of to be able to manage correctly. And then as we look a little bit forward, the early adopters have been in RPA, which is robotic process automation. There's some really cool vendors that have done good work here. You can think about UiPath as a really good example of RPA. The challenge with RPA is historically what you need is to train rote clicks on standardized documents. And so when we think about RPA, specifically in healthcare, and in particular in the use case of inbound documents to a healthcare organization, there's no such thing as standardization. And so RPA becomes really, really difficult to implement effectively for documents and or data that doesn't have standardized effect to it. And as we look toward the future, for where the innovators are going, this is where we're looking at intelligent document processing. And this in particular is using AI to power that process. And when I say intelligent document processing, the fundamental difference between IDP and RPA is that IDP has no limit to the type of document it can look at and understand, and then ultimately transcribe. Versus RPA, the automation that's created breaks down in an exception-based process. And so, like, what is an example, a real-life example of how IDP is being implemented by innovators today? This is a really good example. And this is a little bit of the flow of how you could imagine it. But if you could first imagine an unstructured document, for example, a fax, comes into a provider. And that could be in a digital format, right? There's a full text extraction that is powered by OCR, or optical character recognition, and this entire process is bucketed into a single workflow, right? Where inside of that full text, you can then classify and answer the question, what is this document? What is the type of this document? Oh, it's a prior authorization request. Based off of that prior authorization request, using LLMs that are trained off of that class of document to then extract the key data. And what key data do we need? We need patient identifying information that allows for a unique match in the EHR. And so typically, depending on the EHR, that could be MRN, it could be first name, last name, date of birth, it could be an encounter type, but there's a variety of ways that that can exist. Ultimately, that patient is matched in the EHR. That ultimately goes through validation by a human into the system of record. Really, really important process here is, as a part of this example, all of this happens simultaneously. The only thing that a document worker would see is the document in its end form, which is, we've identified this patient. We think it's this patient in the system. Do you want to match this record to that record, right? And that creates an incredible amount of streamlining, especially when you think about what exists today. What exists today for most organizations, whether it's a provider or inside of EHRs, is a very manual process that is doing this by human touch. Fax comes in, it's read, you try to find the patient's first name. We're talking about multiple minutes on every single fax. So when we think about the NIH's forecast of how and why there's going to be fewer administrative healthcare workers, this is a really good example as to how that impact could be made. And a really, really important point here is that those workers should be redirected into more value-based work for healthcare organizations and invested back into the provider network. So if I was to go through and kind of summarize the key takeaways of where we're going and how or transforming communication in the healthcare space, there's really three things. The first thing is that administrative burden is pervasive in the healthcare space and is typically being driven by communication complexity. Point two would be that interoperability, there's been a lot of work, good work, that we certainly applaud and I'm certainly very proud of in terms of EHR to EHR integration. However, there's still work to be done in terms of document interoperability and making the world work in a way that meets us where we're at and not innovate to necessarily where we're going. And while we know the policy impact is unknown, we do know that AI can have a big impact on this administrative complexity and is already having an impact on administrative complexity today. And that's what we are thinking is going to be the, one of the big advancements that AI is going to bring to healthcare as we look to 2025 and beyond. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining today. Appreciate a large crowd coming in to listen. I'll open up for questions. Any questions in the audience? Awesome. Well, look, I hope if anybody wants to nerd out a little bit on AI and IDP and technology that's built for healthcare, please come talk to us. We're in booth 2667. We'd love to have a conversation. I certainly enjoy a good discussion. Please come and challenge our thoughts and challenge our ideas. We'd love to engage more. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy your hymns.